The ruins of Angkor are both breathtaking and deeply unsettling in equal measure. The city appears like a memory carved in stone, where towers poke through the jungle and silence keeps the secrets of an empire that once ruled water and rice. This is a story about ambition measured in square kilometers, about kings who declared divinity, and about engineers who built reservoirs as large as lakes to feed a growing population. It is also a story about how intensive human systems collide with nature and history, and why a city that seemed invincible slowly became a legend swallowed by vines. The Khmer Empire did not appear out of nowhere on a single day in history. It grew from earlier polities in the Mekong Valley, blending influences from Indian traders, local chiefdoms, and powerful riverine communities. Funan and Shenla are names that archaeologists and chroniclers use to trace the roots of Khmer statecraft and maritime trade. Those early kingdoms established patterns of rulership, religious practice, and irrigation that the Khmer would intensify and reconfigure into something unprecedented. Jayavarman II is the figure commonly credited with founding the unified Khmer polity in the early 9th century. He declared himself a universal monarch by performing a Devaraja ritual harnessing divine authority to centralize power across diverse territories. That ceremony was not merely theatrical political theater, but a deliberate technique to integrate local elites into a new state. By elevating kingship to a cosmic scale, the Khmer leadership justified large public works and labor mobilization on an extraordinary scale. Angkor was not chosen at random for its location on the Tonle Sap floodplain and fertile soils. The geography provided a unique confluence of seasonal flooding, flat plains, and a dramatic lake whose flow changes with the monsoon, making it ideal for intensified rice production. That landscape both enabled and constrained Khmer ambition in equal measure, because ambition meant harnessing unpredictable water and turning it into predictable harvests. The genius of Angkor was less about monumental temples than about creating a landscape reshaped by human hands to secure sustenance and power. Urban planning at Angkor was an act of imperial choreography designed to link ritual space with agricultural control. The city sprawled across hundreds of square kilometers with concentric enclosures, temple mounds, and avenues aligned to cosmological principles and practical logistics. Roads, causeways, and embankments connected villages to temples and reservoirs, weaving a network that allowed officials to move goods, labor, and messages across vast distances. The scale of this planning suggests a level of centralized coordination that rivals some of the greatest ancient metropolises. The Khmer built in stone with a meticulous virtuosity that still astonishes modern builders and archaeologists. Using sandstone and laterite, crews carved narratives into walls and assembled blocks into towers without the benefit of iron cranes and modern lifting gear. This architecture combined local traditions with technical lessons from India, producing a signature aesthetic of towering prasats, corbelled galleries, and intricate bas reliefs. Those walls were not just decorations, but instruments of statecraft, broadcasting divine kingship and cosmology to anyone who entered the city. Angkor Wat is the most famous and most ambitious of all Khmer monuments. Constructed in the 12th century under King Suryavarman II, it was conceived as a cosmic mountain shrine, a monumental expression of kingship and devotion that dwarfed contemporaries across the Indian Ocean world. Built from millions of carved stones and oriented to precise cosmological axes, Angkor Wat became both a political statement and a devotional center that redefined what a temple could be. Its scale is not just numerical but symbolic, communicating an empire's confidence in its power and place in the universe. The symbolism embedded in Angkor Wat is dense, deliberate, and multi-layered in its meanings. The central towers represent Mount Meru, the mythic axis of the universe, while concentric galleries mirror cosmic oceans and the king's role as a world center. Every relief, every walkway, and every orientation encoded a theological argument about kingship, order, and the cosmic legitimacy of the Khmer state. Angkor Wat therefore functioned both as a house of worship and as a three-dimensional manifesto of imperial ideology. Temples across Angkor tell different chapters of Khmer history, from the enigmatic faces of Bayon to the tree root-embraced stones of Top Rome. Each temple acted as a node in a larger network of ritual administration and regional identity. Bayon, with its smiling towers, projected royal presence and Buddhist devotion, while Tate Prom now symbolizes the romance of rediscovery, where roots and stones fuse into a single ruinous artwork. Together, these monuments reveal how religion, policy, and aesthetics coalesced into an imperial language carved out of rock. At the heart of Angkor's success was a sophisticated hydraulic system that historians now recognize as one of the most advanced of its time. Engineers created enormous reservoirs called reservoirs, a maze of canals, and embankments to capture and redistribute monsoon water across the floodplain. This water infrastructure was both agricultural and political, enabling multiple rice harvests and allowing rulers to project power by controlling the flow of life-sustaining water. The scale and ambition of the system required constant maintenance, centralized oversight, and enormous labor investments. The engineering of Angkor relied on precise embankments, spillways, and sluices that regulated seasonal extremes with remarkable subtlety. These structures were not static monuments but dynamic systems designed to absorb monsoon floods and store excess water for dry seasons. Archaeological evidence shows intentional gradients, retention basins, and interconnected channels that optimized water distribution across fields. This was not accidental hydrology, but a carefully planned and continually adapted network built to maximize agricultural yield and minimize risk. The Khmer economy depended heavily on intensive wet rice agriculture powered by their hydraulic infrastructure. Multiple harvests were possible where water could be reliably stored and released, creating surpluses that supported urban populations and elite consumption. Rice surpluses enabled craft specialization, temple construction, and militarized expansion, because people could be fed while labor worked on non-agricultural projects. In this way, the control of water became the control of time, labor, and the political calendar of the empire. The Khmer state organized massive labor forces through a corps vivia system that obligated people to work on public projects for the king. This labor mobilization underwrote everything from temple masonry to canal dredging and seasonal road maintenance. Such a system required strong central authority and administrative reach into villages spread across the empire. It also created a reciprocal expectation of services and protection that bound communities to the central state. But it placed enormous strain on local capacities during prolonged projects or crises. Religion shaped Khmer governance through an intertwining of Hindu cosmology and local beliefs that legitimized kingship. Rituals, priestly authority, and temple offerings formed the cultural backbone that sustained royal prestige and public loyalty. Brahmanical practices like the Devaraja ritual linked the monarch to gods and required constant ceremonial attention and temple upkeep. This spiritual architecture paralleled the physical architecture, making religion and statecraft almost indistinguishable in many public spaces. Over time, Buddhism grew in influence across the Khmer world, and it reshaped royal ideology and popular practice in profound ways. Mahayana iconography and later Theravada simplicity both left deep imprints on temple art and social life. The shift toward Buddhism also reflected broader cultural flows across Southeast Asia, as merchants, monks, and envoys carried ideas along maritime and riverine routes. Religious change in Angkor was therefore as much about external exchange as it was about internal reform and spiritual choice. Khmer art and iconography are among the most eloquent records of a civilization that could not always be read in written script. Bas-reliefs narrate heroic battles, everyday markets, and mythological journeys with craftsmanship that communicates social values and political priorities. Apsara dancers carved into temple lintels and panels remind us that aesthetic performance mattered as much as military conquest. These images became cultural memory, teaching future generations about ideals, hierarchies, and the empire's view of human destiny. The Khmer Empire expanded through a combination of military campaigns, strategic marriages, and control of regional trade routes across the Gulf of Thailand and inland rivers. Control of trade networks delivered wealth, exotic goods, and diplomatic leverage to Angkorian rulers. Ports and riverine access mattered to the state's ability to import luxury items and to export rice and other staples. That maritime and inland economic web connected Angkor to distant markets, making the empire an active player in regional commerce and geopolitics. Maintaining a sprawling empire required diplomatic skill, military readiness, and procedural governance across diverse peoples and geographies. Local governors, temple elites, and commercial intermediaries formed a mosaic of power behind the royal center. Vassalage, tribute, and alliances were instrumental in extending Khmer authority, but they also introduced dependencies and potential fractures into the system. The empire's cohesion therefore rested on an ever-shifting balance of coercion, reciprocity, and cultural persuasion. Foreign chronicles, especially Chinese records, are vital sources that illuminate Angkor's connections and reputation across Asia. These documents describe envoys, tribute missions, and occasional conflicts, offering external perspectives on Khmer power and prestige. Maritime travelers and neighboring polities both admired and contested Angkor's dominance, creating a dynamic of competition and cultural borrowing. These interactions helped shape Khmer institutions, technologies, and beliefs as they absorbed and adapted foreign influences. The first serious cracks in Angkor's armor began to appear through environmental stresses that accumulated over centuries. Deforestation for fuel and agriculture changed hydrology, increasing erosion that clogged canals and reservoirs with sediment. Those slow processes undermined the very water system that underpinned Angkor's agricultural surplus and political stability. The engineering marvel became vulnerable when landscapes were altered beyond the original design's capacity to adapt. Climate variability also played a critical role, with evidence pointing to swings between prolonged droughts and intense monsoons within short spans of years. Such variability stressed reservoirs designed for a different hydrological regime and required rapid adaptation the system could not always provide. Repeated cycles of flood and drought would have necessitated continuous maintenance and political will to mobilize labor resources that sometimes were unavailable during times of internal conflict. In this way, environmental shocks amplified existing social and political vulnerabilities. External pressures from neighboring Siam and other polities accelerated Angkor's decline in the 14th and 15th centuries. Military incursions, shifting trade routes, and the rise of coastal power centers shifted the balance of regional influence away from the inland capital. Siamese invasions captured key territories and periodically sacked Angkor, undermining centralized authority and interrupting the maintenance cycles critical for the hydraulic systems. Political fragmentation followed, and the logistical backbone that had supported the city slowly unraveled in the face of continuous external stress. As the central state weakened, the population progressively relocated to more secure and economically flexible centers in the south near the Mekong and coastal ports. Angkor's dense suburban and agricultural landscape gradually emptied as people sought livelihoods elsewhere. When maintenance stopped and temples were no longer occupied, the jungle reclaimed avenues and causeways with astonishing speed. Stone crumbled under roots and moss, and within centuries the city shifted from living metropolis to monumental ruin remembered by few, but preserved in temple stones. European explorers and later archaeologists rediscovered Angkor in the 19th century, sparking fascination and scholarship across the globe. That rediscovery led to a complex era of archaeological projects, colonial interest, and eventually national reclamation of heritage by Cambodians. Early explorers romanticized the ruins, whereas modern archaeologists use technology like LiDAR to reveal previously invisible features, like canals and settlement patterns. The combination of historical inquiry and scientific tools has transformed our understanding of Angkor from isolated temples to an integrated, engineered landscape. The legacy of the Khmer Empire is both tangible and intangible, shaping Cambodia's national identity and regional culture to this day. Angkor Wat appears on the Cambodian flag and in national stories as a source of pride and continuity, despite centuries of turmoil. Beyond nationalist symbolism, Khmer architecture and ritual influenced temple building, dance, and legal traditions across Southeast Asia. These cultural echoes remind us that empires leave complex inheritances that survive political collapse and environmental change. Today, the story of Angkor speaks to modern challenges about sustainability, urban planning, and the relationship between humans and ecosystems. Scholars now see Angkor as a cautionary tale about the limits of engineering triumph when systems exceed ecological boundaries. But Angkor also offers lessons in ingenuity, coordination, and cultural creativity that still inspire architects and planners. The ruins are therefore both warning and wonder, presenting a dual legacy that invites contemporary reflection on scale, ambition, and resilience. Preserving Angkor is an ongoing political and ethical endeavor involving archaeologists, local communities, and international organizations. Decisions about conservation, tourism, and development carry implications for livelihoods and the integrity of the archaeological record. Balancing economic benefits from tourism with the need to protect fragile structures and hydrology demands careful policy choices and long-term vision from Cambodian authorities and global partners. In this way, the site continues to be a living laboratory for how societies steward their past while negotiating present needs. Angkor stones tell a story that is not only about kings or temples, but also about ordinary people who tilled fields, carved stone, and navigated seasonal uncertainty. Their labor created the material foundation of the empire, and their stories are embedded in everyday scenes carved into walls. Listening to these human voices gives the past texture and moral complexity, reminding us that monumental achievements were social projects with costs and benefits distributed unevenly across society. It complicates the heroic narratives and invites empathy for those who built and lived in the vast cityscape. Angkor remains an interdisciplinary puzzle that rewards collaboration between historians, engineers, ecologists, and local knowledge holders. Recent LiDAR surveys continue to reveal roads, ponds, and neighborhoods that shift our sense of scale and complexity about the urban footprint. These discoveries challenge older assumptions and compel us to think of Angkor as an engineered social ecology, rather than a mere collection of monumental tombs. That reframing helps us ask better questions about how complex societies adapt to environmental stress and technological limits. Angkor's narrative finally converges on a philosophical threshold where human ambition meets planetary processes that do not negotiate. The Khmer built an empire that rewrote landscapes to secure food and authority. And yet those same transformations helped produce vulnerabilities they could not ultimately repair. That paradox is relevant to every modern civilization attempting to manage vast infrastructures at planetary scale, because it asks which systems we can sustain and which we cannot. Angkor therefore becomes a mirror in which contemporary societies can examine the trade-offs between growth, resilience, and humility. If this story gave you a new way to see the past and the present, then there is more to explore in the interplay of engineering, religion, and environment. Angkor is not only an archaeological case study, but also a human story about choices, consequences, and creativity at scale. If this perspective changed how you think about civilization and sustainability, consider subscribing and joining the conversation in the comments below. Your engagement helps keep the past alive and relevant for future conversations about how we shape our common world.